we were kind of like the only ones without a father presence in our home. And so obviously those brings a lot of struggles, not just to my mother that had to go by just a single income in arguably one of the most expensive states in the entire nation. That's kind of like what amazes me of the unique story of the immigrant into California. Specifically maybe like a Latino and Hispanic, is that they come from such an impoverished country to one of the most expensive states, and instead of complaining, they're just like, I just gotta push through, I have to continue on.
Being raised in Los Angeles as the son of a single Mexican immigrant mother, our guest today is Anthony Cabassa. So, how did he become a U.S. Coast Guard, a community and political activist with 100,000 followers? Keep on watching to find out.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So let me get started by going a little bit in your, how you grew up. Can you tell us a little bit about that as being a Latino in the Los Angeles community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Woodland Hills, California, which is a city here in Los Angeles County. Born to a single mother. My dad ended up leaving when I was 3 years old, so it's basically just kind of been myself and my siblings with my mom. She is an immigrant from Ensenada, Mexico. She came here in the 80s, and my older sister was actually born in Mexico, so I'm the first one actually born here in the United States.
Tell me more. Are your parents together, or did you grow up with that type of family, or how was that?
Yeah, so when I was 3 years old, my dad and my mom, they were never married, and they ended up separating at that time. And so it was basically my older sister, myself, and then my mom was pregnant with my middle brother, because it's 4 of us in total on my mother's side. And then I also have 2 other half siblings with my father. But since 3, we've kind of just been on our own, struggling to just kind of get through. My mom just working night shift. She's been in the healthcare field, working as a janitor. I think they call it like environmental services now, EVS. And she's been doing that for close to 40 years now. And so that's basically what she's known and done for so long. And she did it because it afforded her benefits. It gave her decent pay. It gave us health care for all of us, right, so that we can be well taken care of. And so it was a pretty rough upbringing without a father, It's one thing to kind of look at statistics and read about, the impact of fatherless homes. And then it's another living through it, because you're trying to just get by. You're trying to go to school. You're trying to, we're really religious. We were raised Christian Pentecostal. And it was really hard going to church when you see other families with, as a whole unit, and then we were kind of like the only ones without a father presence in our home. And so obviously those brings a lot of struggles, not just to my mother that had to go by just a single income in arguably one of the most expensive states in the entire nation. That's kind of like what amazes me of the unique story of the immigrant into California, specifically maybe like a Latino and Hispanic, is that they come from such an impoverished country to one of the most expensive states, and instead of complaining, they're just like, I just gotta push through, I have to continue on. And that is something that I think has left such a big imprint in me from my mother, in that despite all the obstacles, not having a husband, raising children by herself, working a job that society kind of sees like, well, that's not really an accomplished trait per se, and then still being able to overcome the cost of living, high gas prices, high, housing, rent. I mean, she just overcame so much, and that to me is, I think, a family legacy that she's instilled onto me, is you just got to keep going. I know the odds are stacked against us, and I know this is one of the most expensive places to be, but if I can do it with knowing no English, not even having a middle school degree, and just working the best that I can, then so can you. And that to me just resonates to this day today. And it's just one of those struggles that we had to overcome together as a family without that father presence there. But we overcame.
That's incredible. That's very incredible. And it speaks a lot about the female presence now, especially now with what you hear in the news about like female rights and things like that. But I think every culture has the tradition of that strong female presence through our mothers, correct? So I think all of us have that connection. And I know you mentioned before you lived in the hood, right? Right? Especially here in Los Angeles. And around that time that you were growing up, it was pretty heavy, right?
Right.
So how did that help? Like how did your culture and your mom, your religion help you get through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with even just the living location of where you grow up in, there's also that cultural, maybe not segregation, but like the things that break you away from maybe other communities and other cultures. And for us, it was, obviously gangs were pretty predominant, and especially in the Latino culture, because a lot of us, most of our communities were predominantly Latino and Hispanic. And so there was a lot of gangs, and there was a lot of fatherless homes. And so I see that today still, where you have like these gangs and you have like these little, I guess what you would call cliques of people, you know, that hang out together. And that was the most prominent that I saw in our school system, was these little cliques of people where it wasn't necessarily a gang, but it kind of had like a gang light, you know, where you would just call them like your crews or your clique of friends, and it kind of had like the same feeling of a gang because you still had to be like jumped in and jumped out. And I remember a lot of my friends belonged to like the Teardrop Locos. That was our thing, like in middle school and beginning. And I think that it really called to a lot of, I guess what you would call outcasts of society, the people that never really belonged or felt like they belonged, because there was that sense of a broken home. There was never that sense of normalcy. There was never, you know, and I never felt like it was maybe at home, because my single mom would always work, you know, and God bless her for that, you know, because that's the only way we were able to survive anything was her hard work. But then also not having that sense of family unit. So it always just kind of like felt broken. And so you wanted to belong, whether it be to like a group of friends or a hobby or just somewhere in society that you wanted to get along with other people that were maybe in your same situation and have that sense of belonging. And for us in the school system, it was just the gangs, the crews, hanging out with other people that you felt would do anything for you, you know, and maybe even possibly bad things, you know, but helping you.
You mentioned that after getting out of high school, you wanted to be a chef. So how did you transition from that to going to become a chef?
I think that what drew me to cooking was, you know, growing up, I was able to visit my father from time to time because of the custody that they shared, my father and my mother. And I noticed that he would always cook in his house. And I thought that was very interesting.
Very.
And yeah, I know. But I think it also might be like a cultural thing. Although I would say, in all fairness, it's usually the moms that cook a lot, right? But for whatever reason, I had a lot of uncles that cooked a lot too. And so I thought that was very interesting because I'm like, wait a minute, like what's happening with the traditional values here, you know? But I saw that my dad really enjoyed that. And maybe that's a cultural difference between Puerto Rican men, because my dad's from Puerto Rico, and then maybe like Mexican men, right? Maybe because you have like the East Coast Latino, and then you have like that West Coast, more SoCal and Mexico culture, which is something that I saw in a lot of Mexican homes. Traditionally, the mother would be the one in the kitchen cooking up the food, which was also the case for us. But hey, if my mom didn't cook, then we didn't eat. So she almost didn't really have a choice. But with my father, he really, really enjoyed cooking. And I would always watch him. I would always sit with him whenever I came to visit, and he'd always be watching the Food Network. And I remember Chef Emeril Lagasse. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was a very famous Italian chef. He had his own show, and he was very known for always kind of like throwing like a spice and going, bam, you know, and then there you have it. Here's my dish to you. And I remember he would always be writing notes. and he'd be writing down the ingredients. Okay, what do I do next? How long do I sear it for? And I would look over at my dad and I'd be like, you really enjoy this? Like, this is really your afternoon? You're looking at recipes from this professional chef on Food Network, and you're gonna cook this tonight. We're gonna go out to the grocery store and you're gonna cook this tonight. He's like, yeah, what's the problem? And I was like, you must really like cooking. And he's like, I love cooking. Like, I love food. You know, who doesn't love food? Which is true. Who doesn't love food?
Right.
And so watching him with the Food Network, I got into the Food Network and I started loving to cook.
You mentioned how because of wanting to become that, you ended up being in the U.S. Coast Guard. Can you explain how that happened and how transitioning to that, you ended up also being involved directly with like cartels and human trafficking? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I guess maybe I thought cooking was not enough. I need to be rounding up bad guys while I'm cooking, you know? So I said, how can I make one of the most dangerous jobs in the world even more dangerous, you know? So I was cooking with a gun, and I decided, I think I want to look into the military now. And that is when my dad took me to a recruiting station, and I was trying to figure out what branch really I wanted to do. And I remember that the U.S. Coast Guard was not only hiring cooks and chefs, but they were also offering the highest bonus out of all the military branches, which at the time was $10,000, which to a very broke 18-year-old, $10,000 might as well be $1 million. Because I was like, man, I could really use this money and use it, you know? And yeah, I walked into the recruiting office and I ended up signing up for the U.S. Coast Guard as a chef.
And you were there for around 11 years, is that correct?
Yes, I served in the U.S. Coast Guard from March 2006 to, I believe it was January 2017.
So how did you get into this, you know, like involved with the cartels, seeing the cartels, and also with the human trafficking aspect? And you did it for so long. So what did you see for those who are not aware of what's going on in our oceans? Because some of them are coming through the ocean.
Correct.
Can you tell us?
Yeah, so my 11 years in the military were some of my greatest years and some of my worst years. And I don't say like worst because I don't like the military. It was just, it was a great time. It was a great learning experience being out in the fleet and serving people 3 to 4 times a day, sometimes 5 times a day, depending on how busy the day was, and constantly hearing feedback from them, you know, like, hey, your food is great, but also your food can sometimes suck, you know? And so you're kind of like perfecting your craft that first year. You're learning, you're adapting, you're also talking with people, you're trying to see, hey, what do you like? And I think that what made the military interesting is that you have so many different cultures, so many different people, because anyone can enlist to be in the military, so long as you're a U.S. citizen. And so, of course, you're going to have people from Guam, you're going to have people from Florida, you're going to have people from Alabama, you're going to have people from Alaska, you're going to have people, so everyone has, you know, unique taste bud, something that they like, something that they don't like. And so it was kind of hard to acclimate to that, where, you know, you can make one thing and someone says this is some of the best food I've ever had, and then someone else has said, I used to have this where I'm from. This is garbage. Like, this is not good. This is not the right spices. You forgot to add this. And so when you're a chef, it's like everyone's a critic. You know, everyone knows what you could have done better. But fast forward to basically the drug interdiction and the migrant interdiction. This was back in 2009 to, I'd say, 2012, where I was stationed in San Diego, California. And I was a Spanish interpreter for the vessel that I was on. I worked for the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Chase, which was a 378-foot boat. And then there, what we would do is we would go down the Pacific, all the way down to Panama. We'd go down as far south as Peru. And so basically the way it works is we have helicopters on our boats, and then they would go out sometimes for hours at a time. And they would tell us, hey, we found, you know, some vessels and stuff like that. And so we had teams that were basically designated to pursue, because in our ships, we obviously have smaller, what we call go-fast vessels, which basically are able to compete with some of the vessels that the cartel have in order for them to go as fast as they can, as far north as they can, so that they can unload what they call mercancía, or the merchandise, which would be the immigrant people and a lot of the drugs that they would pass. I'd say the two most known drugs that they would pass back then would be marijuana and cocaine. And I remember when we used to apprehend them, one of the first things that they would do is they would try to start throwing all the drugs overboard. And the reason why they would try to throw the drugs overboard is because the charges are a lot less on saying that you're simply an immigrant trying to enter the U.S. illegally than if you were to try to say like, well, yeah, I tried to run all these drugs. And so there's probably, and I don't recommend anyone going scuba diving for them, but there's probably millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, of drugs somewhere in the deep Pacific, because that's what they do. They dump all these drugs overboard, and they try to dump as much as they can before you physically board them, so that the charges are a lot less. Because obviously the charges are less on $10 million worth of cocaine than $5,000 worth of cocaine. And so this was a strategy that I was starting to see. This is what really opened my eyes to what we were really fighting, what it means to protect our nation's borders, what it means to be out there on the front line, seeing these things for yourself, reading the reports, reading the intel, working with foreign governments to basically stop this illegal flow of drugs and humans into the United States. And so being the cook, I was the one that prepared the food for the detainees. So as we detained cartel, drug smugglers, illegal migrants, I was able to talk with them. And you know, we bathed them, we fed them, we always treated them right. In my 11 years working in the Department of Homeland Security, I never witnessed any maltreatment of any person, regardless if they were a criminal or if they were an innocent pregnant mother that just wanted to come into the U.S., what have you. And so, but during that time, I would always see activist groups talking about Department of Homeland Security and talking about the mistreatment of migrants and kids in cages and all that stuff. And I was trying to understand why there were so many hit pieces in our department. You know, like our military branch, wait a minute, I'm Department of Homeland Security. They're talking about me, you know? How could this be true if I am physically providing first aid and food to people, regardless if they're criminals, if they're in handcuffs, if they're not in handcuffs, whatever. We apprehend, we treat them like human beings. And we were always taught that. Never once did I hear a condescending comment. I never saw people laughing at the detainees. I just never witnessed it. We always behaved ourselves professionally because we knew we had a job to do. And it wouldn't benefit us to treat them harshly, regardless of whether they were headed to jail or just to be released back into Mexico or wherever their country of origin was. And that is when I started opening my eyes to what propaganda was, to misinformation, to basically fake news about how we carried ourselves from our day-to-day operations. Now, just because I understand confirmation bias, just because I never witnessed this doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But I started paying a lot more attention. And I started telling my family, you need to pay attention, because a lot of what they are saying is either false or misleading, and they're trying to demonize us for doing our job. And the thing is, I served all 8 years of Obama's presidency, I served under him. And I remember the emails they would send us. Great job protecting our borders. Thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for ensuring that drugs are off the streets, that illegals are off our neighborhoods. I remember that from department heads. And so as I was leaving in 2017, I just remember the complete polarization of our day-to-day operations. Now all of a sudden, closer to 2017, we're the bad guys now. We are the racists. We are the quote-unquote white supremacists for defending our borders. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I serve with every color, culture, and religion here. I know Muslims. I know Buddhists. I know atheists. I know Christians. I know Catholics. I know Hispanics. I know blacks. I know, everyone under the sun puts on that uniform. But it's one thing that, when you were in boot camp, one of the things that the drill instructors just drill into you is once you put on this uniform, and our uniform was blue, it said you're no longer black, white, yellow, brown, you're now all blue. You're all one family now. And there's only one flag you salute, and there's one flag that you serve under, and that's the American flag. That's why it says U.S. Coast Guard on your uniform. And it was never a problem. But as those years under Obama, went by, I just noticed that everything just started changing. And maybe because I didn't serve long enough before Obama, but I just noticed that there was this constant barrage of attacks and slander and misinformation on what Border Patrol agents do, what Department of Homeland Security does, what we do on our day-to-day. We weren't out there because we solely wanted to get rid of brown people. We were out there thinking of our families back in the U.S. and saying, I am so glad that our vessel came across $50 million worth of cocaine to ensure that this never reaches our children's streets. Being able to communicate with these people, to understand, it also gives you that human aspect where you do feel for them. You do feel bad. You do feel that sense of man, I wish there was something that I can do. But unfortunately, you're breaking the law, and we have our job to do. And lest we remind everyone that these are laws put into the books by Democrats and Republicans. It's not just, a one-party rule as to what happens to our nation's borders, and it's not the way it should be. We have people that we need to worry about. We have Americans that are paying taxes, and are relying that we do our job to make our community safer. And that's exactly what we did every single day.
So after serving, you went to the political route a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my entire life I had never been really politically active. When my mom came into this country, I don't think she came here with any political statement. I think she, like most, Hispanics and Latino culture, they say, we're here to work, It's one thing, you'll never see us in the corner begging for money. We're selling something, whether it's oranges or flowers, whatever it is. But we're here to work. And that was the mentality that was instilled in me. And so I think that maybe we were just so busy working, we didn't really have time. And I still see it today. I see people that work 2 to 3 jobs just to get by because the state of California is only getting more and more expensive. And so people need to work more or the same as they were 20, 30 years ago just to survive. And I remember 2017, I left the military and I came back to California. At that time, I was stationed in Massachusetts. And so when I came back to Southern California, as a father, as a husband, I have 3 children, and I'm starting to look around and I start seeing a lot of homeless people. I start seeing that people are doing drugs where I take my children to go to the park or whatever it may be. And I start telling myself, why is it has it just been that I never cared growing up as a child? Maybe I just didn't pay attention to all of this, but it just seems like things are getting worse and worse. We got homeless encampments at every corner, and it seems like less is being done. And so I wanted to get involved. I wanted to inform myself, why is this happening? And then, of course, we had the presidential election, which I think really hyper-politicized every aspect of your life. And thereafter, the media just got out of control with the amount of misinformation that they were pushing. And so when I started hearing media in English and in Spanish, and their absolute hate and disdain for some political people in office, but not others, and you start connecting the dots and you start wondering to yourself, are these people really as bad as the media promotes them? Is this really true? And so I started learning about media bias. I started learning that there are media companies that, despite them trying to do journalism, and I say that with air quotes because it's not journalism. I feel it's like activists have taken over the journalism world. And it's like, instead of labeling things opinions, now it's just like an opinion piece. Well, this is just the news now. And so there was no, I felt like, again, pardon my naiveness to the political world, I just felt that during that time, it just got worse, where you saw that bias inside of news organizations that claimed to be journalists and journalism, but it was more propaganda. And I would see it when they would edit videos, take things out of context, and they would try to manipulate people into believing their narrative.
So is that when you finished being the chairman of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly? Is that correct?
Right. So 2017 was kind of like my political, where do I fit in politics? What are my personal values? What are my personal morals and convictions as a Christian man, as a Hispanic, as a man of faith, right? And having this message ingrained to me, both by words and my mother's actions, that we are here to work. We're not here for handouts. We're not here for the government to give us bailouts and all these things. Because to this day, my mom always tells me, no matter how many interviews you go on, Anthony Cabassa, my son, always remind people I never took a government handout. I never applied for welfare. I never applied for low-income housing. I did it all because I worked my tail off. And I'm like, okay, Mom, I promise I'll always say that. But it was just something that she's always been very proud of. The fact that despite the government basically saying like, yeah, here you go, she was able to see and determine at that time, even at the beginning stages of all these programs, that it was a program meant to enslave you. It was a program that, even though it would help the right people at the right time, and maybe those people were able to go on, today, 2021, I know of many people still in that same program. And I'm like, you've had 30 years and you're still like living under the government. It's insane. Because again, we came to this country and we don't understand how it's ran. We don't understand the parties. We don't understand policy. There's some bills that in order to vote no, you have to vote yes. And in order to vote yes, you have to vote no. It's just so confusing.
So for those who may not lean Republican or Democrat, and maybe they'll think they're liberal, what can you say to the Hispanic community just to start and getting involved or getting more information of being here in the United States, learning the laws, learning what's going on in the community? What would you say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is you don't have to pick a side immediately. When you're first into politics, try to figure out what's really going on. Try to really study propaganda. How is it that they're trying to propagandize you and your vote? For the people that are not involved, I would say you have to get involved. I would have to say, even if you don't think your vote matters in the national level, but your vote still matters at the local, at the very micro local level of government. You're talking about city councils, school boards, water boards. You're talking about your mayor, right? That is where I feel the biggest change can truly happen. And I think you're seeing it now, where you have the federal government trying to overstep their boundaries, or overstep their power, and the only thing protecting the people that don't agree with it is their local government, whether it's a governor or a city council or a school board that's saying we're not adhering to this because we think this is crazy what is happening. That is when you know you've made a difference, is voting at the local level. Get involved with your community, because you can live in your community and you can see all the crime and the drugs and the children selling drugs, literally, in school. So what can I do to change it? You can vote. You can vote, and the thing is, don't ever feel like these politicians, the people that are wanting to represent you, don't ever forget that these people work for you. That means you have every right to show up to a town hall, show up to a debate. You have every right to phone call these people, to send them an email and say, this is what I want. This is what my community wants. We live in this small city with one high school. Gang violence is rampant. If we vote for you, will you promise to look into it? Will you promise to hire school resource officers? When you're talking about the Republican National Hispanic Assembly, when I was a chairman for it, I decided to join because at that time I decided, well, I don't really like the Republican Party, but I feel like it's the only other outlet for me aside from the Democratic Party. And I just don't feel, I almost had to put like a list of things that my convictions, my morals, my values, and say, well, they definitely lean a lot more conservative. So therefore, I am going to vote more conservative. I'm going to vote more Republican. But also, I understand that both parties have their issues, exactly. And so I decided, well, if I don't like something, why wait for it to change? Why complain about it? Why not take over and help change from within? And so going back to mainstream media propaganda, that's what they want you to not believe. They want you to believe that left or right, you can never agree or work on a common good because you're simply too different. One's racist, the other one's progressive. One's for white people, the other one's for people of color. One's for this, one's for that. One's not for the environment, one is. And I think that was what made our organization so unique, is that we were taking back that environmentalism, because I feel like it's been hijacked by political parties. One virtue signals it, and the other one supposedly just doesn't care for it. And so what I wanted to do was bring that back and say, well, look, as a conservative man, obviously I want to see my community beautiful. I want to see trees flourish. I want to see our oceans clean. We're conserving the planet. We're helping make things better around our community. And I've just always been a man of hyper focus on your community. You can have a governor that says things, but if you have a mayor, a school board, a city council that says, we're not doing this because it infringes on people's rights, you've already won. And you just got to keep driving that into people. You got to keep reminding, you have to keep engaging that community, because these people have kids and they go to school, and not all kids turn out like their parents. And so you have to reach out to them and show them like, hey, you matter. You might be going through all this stuff, but why don't you come clean some streets with us? And we had children show up. We had middle schoolers, high schoolers. They're like, dude, I love this. I've been looking for something to do with my community. You all live here. It's not like you're a Republican or organization from Wisconsin hoping to get our money. You live in these communities. You live right here, and you're willing to make that difference with no benefit to you. You're not asking us for money. If anything, you spent your own money that you've helped fundraise to give us the equipment so that we can help clean with you.
That's great.
And they really love that.
Now that you're as a political commentator, is that correct? And also kind of like an influencer, right, in Instagram?
Right.
What's more for Anthony Cabassa?
I think that what's next for me is to continue to inspire people. I've always said I'm not big on the word influencer, but I understand that my actions do influence other people. But I went from activist to basically political commentator, working as a field correspondent with the American, and I love informing people. And to me, I'll consider it a greater win if by simply informing people and just inspiring them to do more, we have better communities because of it. Sure, a specific demographic didn't win the election this come around. But again, so what? Why wait till someone tells us what we can and cannot do? Why not fight for it? I mean, there's glory in fighting for something that the whole world is telling you you're not going to win. We have people from out of state saying, oh, you guys suck. Oh, California, it'll never change. There's no hope for it. But imagine just inspiring that change in people, and things do start changing. I think that the problem is when people think of California, they think Los Angeles and San Francisco. But there's so many great counties out there. There's so many people fighting back. There's families. There's Generation Zers that are rising, that are saying, I'm not okay with this. But I think that as long as people continue to inform themselves, research the truth, not just listen to those 3-second sound clips, but look at the whole video, the whole context of things, I think naturally the truth will set people free. And I think that they'll come to the realization yes, I can be politically involved, but also let me be an activist in my community. Let me show my community that we can come together and overcome anything. There's gang violence. How do we solve this as a community, at the community level? How do we get people elected to represent us here locally to ensure we have all the resources we can? And that is going to be me moving forward. Focus on the local.
Thank you so much for joining us here at Impactful Latinos. Anthony Cabassa, we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.